If you're a listener to this podcast, there's a pretty good chance that you've seen some darkness in your life and there's probably been a lot of pain in your life. And if you're in that spot right now, sometimes that can feel pretty hopeless and helpless, but just from another voice, one stranger to another, you are valuable and recovery is possible. There is a pathway through this and there's a beautiful life when you put together the right principles. So if you're feeling hopeless from a total stranger, there's hope here.
You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I am your podcast host. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 196 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I'm happy to be sharing a conversation with Tyler and Brannon, two brothers who are therapists. I've been wanting to have a therapist on the podcast for quite a while now. We usually get emails from publicists looking to promote books, podcasts, or therapeutic courses. And I have my usual reply for a lot of these types of emails that we are run by the Bay Area Intergroup of SAA, and we follow the 12 steps and 12 traditions of Sex Addicts Anonymous. I'll be getting to traditions 10 and 11 momentarily. So in doing so, we feature the stories and reflections of members of SAA, and according to our traditions, we carry the message of recovery through the program of SAA. And as addicts in recovery, we do talk about therapy and other outside help during our conversations. However, we do not promote those outside causes or issues such as books, podcasts, treatment centers, other recovery programs, etc. And in my emails, I usually ask if they would be interested in sharing a conversation around sex addiction. We'd be happy to have them as guests. And I was so grateful that Tyler and Brannon agreed to this. And I wanted to read a little bit of the email that we got in May. And this is from Tyler's assistant. And the email says, "Hey, Jason. Tyler and Brannon are therapists in the world of compulsive sexual behavior disorder and betrayal trauma healing. They co-host a painfully honest but deeply empathetic podcast. They specialize in helping individuals navigate the complexities of addiction, shame, and trauma to create high-integrity lives. Would you be open to having Brannon and Tyler on for a soul-enriching conversation? They'd attempt a backflip if you're open to exploring this with us. Plus, your audience would love the discussion you'd have together." And there was much more in the email, including a clip of their podcast, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit as well. So we started corresponding in May and finally set a recording for the end of June, and that comes into play at the end of our conversation when we were talking about the World Cup. So just a heads up on that. But for this episode, I chose a few readings from the traditions and then the section of outside help from the Green Book of Sex Addicts Anonymous. Looking at tradition 10, and this is on page 92 and 93, Sex Addicts Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the SAA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. And I'm going to be skipping around here a little bit. Our fellowship in all its activities has really only one issue or concern: recovery from sexual addiction through the program of Sex Addicts Anonymous. When we carry our message or present SAA to the public, that is the one subject we are qualified to provide information. Anything else is considered an outside issue. And I'm going to skip down a little bit onto page 93. SAA has no opinion on other 12-step programs for sexual addiction or in general, treatment centers, therapy, and its various schools and methods, sexual abuse and its causes, the medical definitions of disease and recovery, sex crimes legislation or policy, or the sex scandals of public figures. We neither endorse nor oppose any point of view or organization. And skipping down a little bit, the 10th tradition does not mean that as individuals, we can't have or express opinions on outside issues. So in the past, with our previous guests talking about therapy, that has been their own personal journey. And when I've wanted to have therapists on the podcast, I make sure that we're just talking about the process and we're not here to promote their place of practice, podcasts or books or anything like that. Looking at Tradition 11, and this is on page 94. Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. And this is the reason why I have chosen just to give the first names of Tyler and Brannon and keeping everything general. If you do want to learn more about their podcast or their website, you can always email me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And this is something that I've done with previous guests that have been outside of our program of SAA. The main reading I wanted to read from was on outside help, and this is on page 74 of the Green Book. Many of us have sought therapy in order to help ourselves heal from deep-seated emotional and psychological wounds, including sexual abuse and trauma. We may have suffered grave losses associated with our addictive behaviors or past abuse, and our grief over these losses may seem overwhelming. Or we may find that we need professional support in coping with the effects of sexual trauma. We are free to seek whatever professional help we need in order to aid our grieving and healing process. We may also seek therapy as part of a commitment to self-improvement or awareness. For example, some of us have turned to couples therapy for help with issues that come up in our relationships. We may simply consider therapy part of an ongoing program of psychological self-care. So I use that to kind of preface this conversation. This is a little bit different than usual, where we have a member of SAA talking about their personal journey. And I thought this was a fantastic conversation and hope to have more like this in the future. So before turning it over to the conversation, I did want to mention a few things up front, that we did record this back in June, and so we do talk about the World Cup. And after our conversation, I'll have a little bit more about their podcast, and I actually did hear Tyler on one of my friends' podcasts. I'll talk about that as well. But I also have some listener feedback to read, as well as some music to play. We did talk about music and its role in therapy, particularly bilateral sound and binaural beats. So stay tuned at the end of this episode for those. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Tyler and Brannon, brothers, therapists, and great guys in recovery. Such a fun conversation. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it. I am so delighted to have Tyler and Brannon on the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us,
Jason.
And so, yeah, I received an email from, I guess it's a promotional person for you guys.
Probably one of my assistants, Landy.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I've been coordinating with her, and I'm really glad that we had this opportunity. I was mentioning before the recording that this podcast is run by the Bay Area Intergroup of Sex Addicts Anonymous. And most of our guests are people that are in the program. We've had partners of people in the program. And I've gotten quite a few emails over the past few years from therapists and things like that. And I've come so close to having people on to share a discussion on sex addiction. And it never has quite worked out. So you two are the first therapists that I've had on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man. We're honored.
Cool. So I'm not sure quite how to run this with both of you here, but if you guys want to give a little spiel here, and then we can go back and forth with a conversation. I usually try to keep this more conversational rather than question and answer.
Okay.
Brannon, why don't you go first?
Yeah, a spiel. What do I say? I've been working in this arena for a while. I've kind of seen everything. And my clients, the people I work with, 12-step is really important and a beautiful part of recovery. So, yeah, I know a lot about betrayal trauma, sex addiction. I can really speak to those things. So I'm just really grateful to be here and to share any insights that I can on recovery and what recovery means to me and what's helpful to help somebody along that path.
Awesome. How about Tyler?
Yeah, I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and it's been both professional work and personal work for me. I really believe strongly in the 12 steps. To me, it's like in a working, breathing form of continued repentance for me
Mm.
in terms of return back to self and truth and congruency, and have my own personal story with this, but also a professional side as well. And it's what I think my higher powers called me to. So just happy to be here having these kinds of conversations. Hope we'll do some good in the world. And yeah, let's go for it.
Fantastic. Yeah. A lot of people that I know of that are in recovery, they do go into the professional therapist field. So it sounds like that was part of your story.
Yeah, I think for me, I always knew I wanted to go into marriage and family therapy and help families, but then my own personal stuff led me into that space. And, it's just kind of like, a different way of doing step 12 kind of work. And I think there's a reason why a lot of people who get into recovery turn around and want to get into being helpers that way, is because the passion of finding a new life as a result of doing this work leads you to want to go and shine that light into other places because of the transformation that you've experienced yourself. And so it's kind of a natural transition for a lot of people. I have a lot of clients myself that
Hmm.
end up going to graduate school to go then become some form of a helper as well, because they follow the same kind of a path.
Nice. Brandon, what got you into the therapy field?
I think it's in our blood, our family. Our mom's a counselor.
Hmm.
And then Tyler, he's my older brother. He's a year older than me. I kind of was watching him get into the therapy thing. And honestly, what got me into it was my higher power. I really struggled to know what I was going to do with my life. And then one thing led to another, and I was called to be a therapist and realized, like, whoa, I'm actually cut out for this. I think that I have some skills and some natural abilities to do this work. And so it's not that crazy of a story or that exciting, other than like I was meant to be here, I believe, and so I'm here.
Nice, nice. Both of you had mentioned higher power. And for me, I came into the program as an agnostic atheist, and I had a lot of spiritual damage in my early upbringing, family members and things like that. And organized religion wasn't going to work for me, but I did find a pathway through the 12 steps with a higher power, looking at music and nature. Those are my
Beautiful.
big connection points. Yeah, I do. A lot of my sponsees are kind of the same mind, but I have had. I haven't seen him in quite a few years, but I had a guy in his 70s who was a devout Catholic and just super awesome guy. And so one of the things that I love is having all sorts of faiths represented and different pathways. So both of you mentioned higher power. Is that a religious God for you?
Tyler, you want to go first?
For me, I would say, it's interesting because I would say yes and no.
Hmm.
I am highly religious. I'm a practicing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Hmm.
But for me, my journey has actually been, I think the 12 steps actually helped me a lot with my understanding of higher power, where I was raised with one idea of a certain traditional kind of God that I was taught. And then when things broke open with my need for recovery, I started to realize that even though I was practicing a certain kind of religion, I was actually worshiping a God that didn't work for me.
Mm.
And that it became its own kind of journey. And that's what I love about this is, and what you said is, the wrestle with something bigger than ourselves is just as important as landing on the deity that we worship, because the
Hmm.
wrestle itself is what cultivates the soft heart and the willingness and the openness, the moldability of our hearts to be able to change in recovery. And so I'm still a practicing member, but I'd say my ideas about the God that I worship have changed over the years as I
Hmm.
continue to wrestle with that God. So that's kind of where I fall. And I think Brandon lands in a little bit of a different place.
Yeah, I mean, different but similar in a
Hmm.
lot of ways. In that, I think I'm somewhere in between you guys. Honestly, like religion isn't my thing right now, and definitely was raised in a pretty high demand religion. And but like Tyler, gone through a process of Tyler and I call it firing our God. Like I've definitely fired my God of shame, my God of fear, my God of control.
Hmm.
And then Am I agnostic? I'm definitely not atheist, but I would say I have a belief in a certain higher power, but I definitely don't have a clear total understanding, and it's a journey and a process for me right now too. And so yeah, I'm in that journey, and but spirituality and connection is something bigger than me, is a big part of my life, and it's also a big part of a lot of my clients' lives.
Nice. Yeah, I was just talking to someone a few days ago and talking about how it's not necessarily pertinent to know exactly what your higher power is. It's the willing to believe in something and the discovery of the journey along the way. Tyler, you and I had connected a couple of days ago before this recording, and you had mentioned that you were in Utah. So I thought that that might have been the case. I grew up down the street from an LDS church, and a lot of my friends in high school were in awe of that faith, and so very, very familiar
Yeah.
with that. And so, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, like what you're saying, Jason, I like what you said there, that idea of the journey. And for me, part of what I think helps in this pursuit of understanding higher power, even if I don't know what it is, like you said, maybe it's just a work in progress, is that it became pretty apparent early on in my own journey with trying to find recovery that I had adopted a pretty self-centered way of living.
Hmm.
And that self-centeredness had put me in a trap that if I was still the center of the universe, it was pretty hopeless.
Hmm.
There had to be something bigger than me to be able to put some of the things that I ultimately couldn't control and that I had to surrender to. And I think that's why that wrestle with something with a higher power is so important, is that all of us, if we end up as the center of the universe, we end up, especially with our vices, it ends up being a pretty hopeless, nihilistic place. And when there's something or somebody bigger that is also involved in our recovery, there's a pressure valve that releases the things beyond our control. And I found that to be really, really helpful in providing hope, peace, possibility, growth. And yeah, that wrestle itself is just vitally important.
Yeah. Just a little background on myself. I've been in program for 23 years, I think, something like that. I've kind of lost count
Nice
exactly.
job, man. That's almost a life sentence.
Yeah, 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 and it has definitely been a journey for me. I've gone through the steps a couple of times. I came in primarily with an addiction with pornography, and it was interesting. Voyeurism has been part of my background for since I was a kid, but I did not come into the program for that. It wasn't until I started doing the step work and looking at various aspects of my life, it's like, oh yeah, God, this has been something that I'm completely powerless over. And I started talking about it about like a year and a half into program. And it's like, oh yeah, this is part of my addiction too. I also identify as an intimacy avoidant. When I went to a few workshops on like sexual anorexia, I didn't quite identify with being an anorexic, but I definitely had lots of fears around intimacy. And so I tend to use pornography as a way of keeping myself in this like walled off existence so I don't have to be present with anyone else, and I don't have to be vulnerable. I don't have to show emotions. I don't have to get hurt, but it leads to just a miserable life. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one of the things, Brandon, you talked about betrayal trauma. And so, when I got into program, my wife didn't find a program for herself. She started going to one, and it was more of a co-addict model, and she suffers from CPTSD. And the term betrayal trauma, when I came into the program, was not something readily available, and just seeing so many other books and other podcasts talking about that. So when you brought up betrayal trauma, that is something that I've been aware of, and I try to make other people that are brand new and just going through it and their relationships are starting to break, and mention have your wife, your partner, whatever, do a search term on betrayal trauma. So, what is it that you do? How do you work with that?
Well, it's similar like CPTSD. If you approach it from a trauma angle rather than like a co-addict or codependent angle, then you're not so focused on, getting the partner to stop enabling and things like that. You're focused on understanding why they're having a trauma response to the situation and what that trauma actually is. And it's important to understand like what betrayal trauma really is. And it's so new that I think they're kind of really getting it defined and what it is. And you can find everything out there. But to understand that it is trauma, to understand that there's going to be triggers, that a natural response to the trauma is fear and control or avoidance, learning how to recognize that in yourself, learning how to regulate yourself, your emotions, build recovery capital around yourself so that you can navigate those triggers as they come, and then go through the healing process for that trauma, facing the pain of it, grieving the loss of the life that you thought you had, and working a full process of recovery. So in a nutshell, that's what betrayal trauma is. And it's a much better approach than like a co-addict type of approach to the recovery process for the partners.
Yeah, Tyler, I'll let you go in just a second. We have a partner program called COSA, and it used to be a co-addict model. So it was co-addicts of sex addicts, but now COSA doesn't really stand for anything anymore because more and more people in that program do identify as the betrayed. And a lot of them do look at the PTSD model. So that has been helpful. And one of the things that we do, we partner up with them, and we've got a quarterly meeting that we have speakers from both sides. A couple times it's landed that it's a couple in recovery that are both doing the speaking at the meeting, but I share those stories on the podcast. And so this podcast isn't exclusive for sex addicts. We do have a lot of partners that listen as well. And so, I like getting that information out for whoever may need it. And Tyler, I noticed, were you going to jump in and say anything?
Oh, no, yeah. I was just going to just kind of say, I think one of the slight nuances is like when you look at it from the old kind of co-addict model, some of what the typical responses are for a betrayed spouse are the things that the co-addict model looks at, right? The thing like the enabling or the control or whatever. But I think what Brandon was getting at is when you back it up even a little bit further, and maybe we could use like what you just beautifully self-disclosed about some of your own journey, that aversion, the intimacy aversion that you're talking about, that could almost, I would bet, be reclassified into you're also having your own trauma response and your coping is the aversion. Even though that the aversion might be the thing you would focus on with a therapist or with somebody else, what you really need is, what am I coping from? Where did I learn to be so afraid of this intimacy? What am I so afraid of? What are the core beliefs around all of that? And so like with a betrayed spouse, we just want to make sure that we're addressing the symptoms of the trauma, and the symptoms of the trauma are sometimes the co-addict behaviors, but there's also a whole broken heart. There's a lot of fears. There's a lot, as Brandon said, there's a grieving process that people need to be able to go through in order to get to the other side of the healing. And a lot of times partners aren't even acknowledged. And if they are acknowledged, they're kind of focused on here's how you help your addicted partner. And sometimes they actually just need their own space to say, hey, we see you. There's a process here for you too. Let's get you grounded. Let's get you thinking clearly again. Let's get you not feeling so gaslit. Let's get you healing from your trauma. And then it makes it easier for them if they choose to lean into that relationship further, if they choose to stay.
Yeah. One of the questions that I had was, who is your primary clientele? I know that one of you had mentioned working with families. Are you working with individuals or couples or families altogether?
I'd say it's mostly couples and individuals, middle-aged couples, either like we call it the messy middle, working through things, trying to figure it out, or couples on the brink of divorce. And then we work with individuals, and we have groups and things, men's groups, women's groups, and we do retreats as well. So like we try to address his, hers, and ours of recovery and get down to the roots of things with people, not just symptom management, stuff like that. And so it's a lot of individual work. It's a lot of deep trauma healing individual work that we do with individuals that then supports the couple to thrive.
Nice. Do both of you work in the same office, or do you have separate practices?
Right now, we have, it's actually both. We have our own practices, but we work together specifically with the niche of sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. And we run just like an online program, which is, it really has a lot of overlap with the 12 steps. So it actually works beautifully with the people who are already working the 12 steps. It pushes them into some other different spaces too, but just like the 12 steps, it doesn't really address necessarily the acting out per se, the sexual acting out. It addresses all of that underlying stuff. There's a wrestle with the higher power. There's a wrestle with identity. There's a wrestle with like cleaning up your life in ways that the shame doesn't keep you so bound. Yeah, so Brandon and I work together on an online practice that goes along with like the show that we do, but we also have our own private practices. So it's kind of, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, when you were mentioning that, looking at the underlying things, I grew up with two of my friends. We've known each other all our lives. The two older of us, we were 18 months old when we met, and the younger one, I think we met him when he was born. So we've had a lifelong friendship. They got into recovery at a much earlier age. I think both of them were into drugs. One was into alcohol as well, and their whole family had been in recovery. So like whenever I've gone over there for holidays and things, we just have had this program speak, and it was so long before I found my way to the rooms of recovery. But what has been interesting is hanging out with them, even though we have different addictions, the core beliefs, the core problems are all the same. And so the different types of addictions, in my eyes, are kind of the various individual band-aids we put on the same problem. So I can sit there and they may not relate to staying up till 5 a.m. looking at porn, but when we start talking about fears, anxieties, resentments, and things like that, it's like all of a sudden we have a common language. So those are the things that the 12-step program covers, and therapy is all those underlying beliefs that enable us to try to cover it up with one form or another. I've got a whack-a-mole addiction with ice cream. So
as do I.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if I'm sober in one program, a lot of times I will ease my discomfort by eating a couple of bowls of ice cream. So yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that 100%. Jason, a couple of thoughts on that too is like just that connection, that common humanity of it doesn't really matter what the behavior is so much as the roots always boil down to shame, trauma, false beliefs, and we can all connect on that level. And yeah, and then I was just going to say, mine's not necessarily ice cream, but it's one that's maybe a little bit different. It's hot lamp food at the gas station.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That one is just like, man, I found myself. I was in an appointment the other day, and my client was suicidal, and I was all stressed out. I took him up to the hospital. I got him checked in, and then as I was driving home, I found myself walking out of the nearest gas station. I had like 2 burritos and a corn dog and like one of those weird tornado things. I got in my car and I looked at all the food and I thought, what is going on here? It was the exact same process mentally and emotionally as it used to be with pornography or something else, right? Like I was trying to cope emotionally because I felt like a failure as a therapist. Well, here I was trying to figure out how to fill the gap or numb the hole or whatever it was. And yeah, it's funny how we just swap those things around sometimes.
Yeah. So we do often refer to that as the whack-a-mole of addictions. So when, like I had mentioned, my childhood friend, when he got into recovery, he started cigarette smoking, and that was kind of the lesser of the evils that were haunting him. So it's like, if that is helping you cope for right now, and he's cigarette free for decades now. But yeah, when I notice him starting to smoke, it's like, if that's going to keep you off the other stuff, so be it. And yeah, I think a lot of us do the addiction switchings, and for me, some of them, they're not as, definitely not as bad, but I binge watch TV shows till too late at night, as well as another way of kind of coping with the anxieties of life, instead of sitting there and doing my step work and say, I'll just pop on another TV show.
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Yeah. So you had mentioned doing retreats. What kind of things does that entail for you?
Oh wow. It's one of the favorite things that we do, right, Tyler?
100%. Brandon and I believe that the greatest changes in us happen when there is not just mental learning, but there is an emotional or spiritually corrective experience that
Mhm.
happens. Like when we experience something, the level of learning goes way deeper than just in our brains. And so we have people join us on these retreats and we push them into some of the places that they know they need to go, but that they've been avoiding. And we do
Mhm.
it as a collective group energy. And then we spend time really getting into the depths of helping them feel pieces of their identity that maybe they've lost touch with rather than just be told that they have them.
Mhm.
And we rely heavily on nature. We let Mother Nature do her job, and just the mountains, the trees, the water, with the collective energy of wholehearted people who are really trying to improve themselves. It just, people come out after these retreats, and the reason why Brennan and I love these so much is that they say things like, man, I've been going to therapy for 10 years and this one weekend was more impactful than all 10 years of my therapy.
Wow.
Like that kind of stuff. And that's what we're looking for. I mean, I bet you if we were to track down even some of the guests you've had on the show or some of your
Mhm.
friends or being in the community, as long as you have, a lot of the people that are finding real success in your 12-step groups would probably come back and say, here's a couple of moments that really mattered that shifted me,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden the 12 steps, they take on a whole new meaning when the feeling and the paradigm starts to shift and go, oh, I understand that differently now than I did before because my heart is in some ways
Mhm.
different, right? That's what our retreats do.
Yeah, I am a member of our retreat committee here in the Bay Area. We put on an annual retreat, and I've been doing them for a number of years. And like everyone that goes and they come back, it's like, this is what kickstarted my recovery. And it was pretty much the same for me. I was scared to go to my first one because I didn't know a lot of people in the program at that time. And back then, I think our retreats were about maybe 70 or 80 people. Pre-pandemic, we were up to about 240.
That's,
Eh,
wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and then post-pandemic, I think we're about 180, which is, still completely awesome. We've got
Yeah, that's
just
phenomenal.
a bunch of speakers, we've got workshops, and something that I had meant to mention up front is in our program, we identify things through a tool called the three circles. And so, inner circle are the core addictive behaviors, middle circle is slippery behaviors, or kind of the warning signs, the yellow light at a stoplight, and then the outer circle. And this is why I wanted to bring this up here when we were talking about our retreat. Outer circle are healthy behaviors. So we're replacing the addictive behaviors with healthy behaviors. And so we have just a ton of outer circle activities going on at our retreats. We've got hiking, so we're out in nature as well. We got games. We've got a dance. Something that I take part in every year is our talent show, and just
What do you
being.
do?
I am a guitarist, and
Oh,
Oh,
so
nice.
awesome, man.
so yeah, sometimes I'll play with a group, and other times I will just throw my phone on there as background. And I'm a huge fan of the band Tool, and
Oh,
so
nice.
yeah, when everyone's like, "What Tool song are you going to play this year?" And so yeah, that has been something that I love, and just seeing shy people at meetings when they get up on stage and do something, it's like when they come back from the retreat, there's like a different connection that we have. And it's just really cool to see that little sparkle in their eyes when they come back. But yeah, a lot of our workshops are deep, heavy emotional things. There was one that I never got the chance to go to because I think I was leading a workshop at the same time, but a brother in recovery had gotten the permission from his Native American tribe, had a forgiveness ceremony. And everyone that went to that said that they were in tears, but it was such a beautiful workshop and ceremony. And it's like every time that he's presented, I'm usually presenting a workshop at the exact same time. But yeah, I love the ability to get away from the normal environment. Because a lot of times, I'll only see these people for an hour a week, and a lot of the people I don't connect with unless we're at the retreat, because we've got, so the Bay Area, I live in Silicon Valley, and we've got San Francisco and Oakland and Berkeley, and for me those are like 50 miles away, so there's a lot of people I don't get to see. But being at a retreat and being able to hang out with people for an entire weekend, it's awesome. It deepens our connections with each other as well. You're no longer just having to get to hear someone share for a couple of minutes. We get to sit down and have meaningful conversations. And this podcast was an idea that came out at one of our retreats.
Nice.
So I'm a huge fan of
Amen,
retreats.
man. And that connection that comes is really powerful. So yeah, I think you're spot on with all of that.
What other kinds of things do you do in your therapy practices, things that we haven't talked about? Like I mentioned, I've never had therapists on the program before, so I'm not quite sure what types of things to be asking, but from what you guys have talked about, it's really been in line with things that have definitely thought about. But yeah, if you have other things you want to explore, please feel free.
Yeah, we take a holistic approach, but we provide as many different resources as we can. So anything from individual work, and we'll do things like EMDR, IFS, like trauma healing modalities, along with things like DBT and CBT. Like, we'll help with anything from relapse prevention tools to doing deep trauma healing on real wounds. But then group work is a huge part of what we do. And our groups are very important, and they're weekly. People like really dive into the weeds. It's different than a 12-step group. It really, like Tyler said earlier, it goes hand in hand with 12-step, like really nicely. We're doing our trauma work in there as well. And then we have things like retreats. So all of those things all together gives the clients everything they need. And we do that for men, women, and we work with couples too.
Nice. One of my friends had done you used so many acronyms right there. But
I know.
The one with
EMDR.
Yeah, he had experienced that and said it brought up a lot for him and just how beneficial it was, but it was hard work. Can you go into what you do for that?
Yeah, you bet.
Go with it, Jason. Go with
it. Yeah. And here's how I think it works really well with something like 12-step is as people doing their steps, as they get into places where they're doing things like their inventory, they start kind of coming to grips with their body of work of their life, so to speak. They start to find and connect dots that certain life experiences have reinforced certain beliefs that they're now living by today that are causing them some of the same problems. And so what EMDR is a treatment where you go and you find what are the significant events in my life that have shaped the way that I view myself, others, relationships, the world, that is no longer adaptive for me. And then they use eye movement as part of it. But the bigger issue is that they help the brain reprocess and desensitize the pain out of the old memories, but then reprocess those things to have a new belief system around them. So you're right, your friend would definitely have things come up because it's designed to, like, we used to run away from trauma and say, don't re-traumatize somebody. And now what EMDR says is, let's go into and through this trauma and let's make a different meaning out of it. So we'll bring up the memory and then we'll start what's called the processing, and that's where the eye movement comes in. And the reason they use the eye movement is to get both the right and left hemisphere of the brain activated and also have the therapist be able to track whether or not the client is checking out or dissociating.
Mm.
And then we just let the client have their brain do the healing by noticing thoughts, memories, sensations, emotions that go through them. And we let the body and the brain do what they were designed to do that we and our egos don't allow to happen. People often come out of it going like, whoa, that was really, really hard, but that memory, number one, doesn't sting like it used to, but number two, like, I don't have to allow myself to keep living this way anymore. Like I see
Mm-hmm.
it differently. I feel it differently. So, like Robert Frost said, the best way out is always through.
Mm-hmm.
We're going through the trauma with something like EMDR. The therapist is just there as a silent witness and a guide, but the person is actually using what's already built into them to heal.
Nice. Does binaural sound work in the same way? I've heard a couple of people talking about that, and a lot of the music that I listen to. It's interesting. They've said that they've designed it in a way to help you, but without really talking about it. But I do notice music going really hard left, hard right, and back and forth. And a lot of people that do listen to this kind of music are into healing themselves. And so, yeah, I was wondering if there was any difference between, or if they work kind of similar between the eye movement or hearing auditory stuff from both sides.
They use it all. So as long as you're stimulating both sides of the brain, so whether it's sound or tapping,
Touch.
they'll do.
Mm,
But a lot of times eye movement is the main thing they do. But really, it doesn't really matter as long as both sides of the brain are being stimulated during the processing.
nice, nice.
It's also
Are,
funny, Jason. A
Jason, are you
lot.
thinking about listening to Tool while you do EMDR?
Hey, yeah, yeah. Also, can't really tell here.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this is a band called Heilung. I play their music on the podcast a lot, and
Nice.
it's a German word for healing. And
Beautiful.
one of the guys who's a genius with sound engineering does a lot of that sort of stuff. They tap into primal music, but they also bring in modern techniques and throw in stuff. He's been doing like Dolby Atmos sound, so you get stuff coming from all different sides. But a couple of their pieces of music, they have deliberately talked about the binaural aspect of it to help. The singer from the band is a shaman as well, so he
Nice.
taps into a lot of ancient stuff
Yeah, cool,
and
man. That's awesome.
yeah. So yeah, I do use music as part of my meditation and doing step work and stuff. So yeah, I think that would be really cool to do that, bring that into therapy as well. But yeah. And Tyler, I don't know if I was starting to cut you off there. If you had something, it may have just completely gone by. But
It was just probably about the bilateral stuff.
mm,
Oh, I was just gonna say that, yeah, it's funny that you brought up the binaural beats because a
mhm,
lot of clients after EMDR, they relate really well to the binaural beats kind of stuff. So they'll actually get into it and it helps them relax. It helps them do other things as well. So there might be something to that. I don't know if
mhm,
there's any research on that yet, but I know I have a lot of clients who after EMDR,
mhm.
they really resonate with the binaural stuff too.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about 45 minutes. There are other things that you would like to share? After that, I've got something kind of out there to think about. But yeah, are there any other aspects of therapy that you would like to have our listeners know about or things that you guys do?
I think I would just say this is just general, but if you're a listener to this podcast, there's a pretty good chance that you've seen some darkness in your life and there's probably been a lot of pain in your life. And if you're in that spot right now, sometimes that can feel pretty hopeless and helpless, but just from another voice, one stranger to another, you are valuable and recovery is possible. There is a pathway through this and there's a beautiful life when you put together the right principles. So if you're feeling hopeless from a total stranger, there's hope here.
Awesome.
Yeah. If I could just add, the only thing I'd add is like, and I'm making an assumption that a lot of the people that listen to your podcast are people who have been in the 12 step for a while, and it's you people that really makes a huge difference for a lot of the people that we work with. And you're the community, you're the fellowship, you're the mentors and the sponsors and the like. It's just, I just want to say thank you. Like, I really appreciate that because without you, a lot of the people that I work with wouldn't find real recovery. So I just really appreciate you, and I appreciate you for listening to me for a little bit here.
Nice, nice. Yeah, we get all sorts of listeners. A lot of people find the program of SAA through the podcast. They'll do like a search on social media and they'll find the podcast, start listening, and say, "Oh man, I never knew that there was a program for this. I've been having problems for a long time." And they'll do just a quick search on sex addiction and recovery, and they find the podcast and then they end up finding the rooms. I've had a couple of people that started listening to the podcast, and their very first meeting is one of them that I go to, and so they hear my voice and say, "Hey, I recognize you." So that's super cool. But yeah, we have veterans of the program. We've got, like I mentioned, partners that listen. We do have a lot of therapists that listen to the podcast as well. They, in turn, let their clients know about the podcast and the program. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, it's a fantastic resource. So
Yeah.
I was going to kind of close it out with there any kind of fun personal things that you would like to share about besides eating gas food station food, any other kind of interests? Like, usually the way our conversations go when I'm interviewing people from the program is we'll get into the addictive behaviors and then kind of talk about recovery, and then we talk about outer circle stuff. There's been a couple of times where I've done like 3/4 of the interview, and then we start talking about music, and then we're just like on a complete different tangent. So yeah, I was just wondering if there are any kind of fun things that you do in your life to help anything, with your families, camping and hiking or things like that.
Go ahead, Tyler. You start.
Well, I'm afraid Brandon's just gonna like blast off on some comment about me to like finish it off. I was hoping he would go first, but yeah, no. Like for me, I've found that my outer circle stuff revolves heavily around, of course, my family and my kids, but tied into nature, outdoor stuff, hunting, fishing, backpacking. Just this last week, I've had a first ever. I've got a bunch of game cameras up in the mountains where I live because
Mhm.
I'm ready for a hunt with my teenage daughter.
Nice.
And for the first time ever, I got a bear on camera.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was my big win for this week is I logged almost 10 miles checking my game cameras, and on my game cameras for the first time ever I had a bear. I had a bear, coyotes, moose, deer, and elk. So it was pretty awesome.
That's cool.
Well, how do I top that? I mean, yeah. That,
You got any bear stories?
yeah, no, I didn't see any bears this week. One thing I'll say is go Team USA.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
We got Belgium coming up in the final 16 or whatever. So that's outer circle stuff. That's exciting.
Mhm.
The other thing is my oldest daughter is turning 18 and moving out and going to college in a little over a month. So that's big for me because it's the first of the empty nest, and it's like a bit of a change in my life, and so something I've been really thinking about. She bought a blender yesterday.
Nice.
But my kids are probably the most important part of. I mean, they're in my inner circle, but when we talk about outer circle,
Yeah, yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So it's all about them, and they're the best, and I love them, and that's where I spend a lot of my time.
Nice. Yeah, I've still got a year to go. Mine's 17, so
Oh, hey, you're
yeah,
coming
yeah,
up on it.
You're right there,
yeah,
man.
yeah, getting close. And fears and anxieties coming up around that one. So
I
yeah, I'm
know.
doing a lot of step work around that. When you mentioned the World Cup stuff, I live really close. I actually work really close to Levi Stadium, which is
Oh,
where
really?
some of the games are. And
Nice.
we've had huge contingency from, I think, from Mexico in downtown San Jose, and just I am a couple of miles from there. I'm really close to the where the San Jose Sharks live, or
Ooh,
where they play as well.
Nice.
But yeah, the footage from the amount of people, they got like big screens out there, and just seeing people jumping up and down, it's been crazy. I'm grateful that I'm a little bit further out from downtown and don't have to deal with all that craziness. But yeah, it's certainly been really exciting, especially having one of the stadiums so close to us.
That's
that's
cool.
awesome, man.
The Super Bowl was there this
Yeah.
year, and so I made sure that any of my commute home went in the opposite direction of the stadium. So,
There
but
you go.
yeah, super cool.
Nice.
Well, all right, guys. I'm so thankful for you joining me here on the podcast for this conversation. It's been really cool. And I will mention also that you guys do a podcast as well.
Yes, it's easy to find. We've done how many episodes now, Tyler? We're
No, there's over 500 of them.
550
Yeah.
episodes. Been
Nice.
doing it for years. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
We just talk. We just talk with real people like you do on your show, and
Mhm.
it's just fun. It's like a hobby for us.
Cool, cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason.
Keep up the good work. All
You're
right,
welcome.
man. Talk
All
to you
right,
later.
Jason.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye. Many thanks to Tyler and Brennan for joining me on the podcast for this wonderful conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'm hoping to have more therapists on the podcast to talk about that aspect of recovery. So I had mentioned at the beginning of this episode that I had just recently heard Tyler on my friend Arlena's podcast, and Brennan was also a guest on that a few weeks earlier. I've known Arlena for 30 plus years, and I was on her podcast back in 2019. So it was really fun to hear them individually on her podcast. But as I was sitting there at work listening to it, I'm just like, hey, that sounds like the guy I just recorded with. And so, yeah, awesome. Like I had mentioned at the beginning, they do have over 500 episodes of their podcast, and I've listened to a few. They're super fantastic. And if you wanted to get a hold of them, check out their website or their podcast. We do this in a roundabout way to not use this podcast as a means of promotion, but you can always get a hold of me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, and I can share that information with you secondhand. At the end of our conversation, I was talking about binaural beats, and I did get a little confused between binaural beats and bilateral audio. And after reading some listener feedback, I will be getting into both bilateral audio and binaural beats and what that is all about. And I have some music samples to play. But first, I wanted to start off with a couple of YouTube comments that we've gotten over the past few weeks. And they're all relatively quick. This one on the bonus episode, Bay Area Retreat Info, and episode 30 repost, got a comment that said, "My bad," with a sad face emoji. And I'm not quite sure what that means. Sometimes we do get comments that are bots, so I'm not sure exactly what that one's all about, but I thought I would share that nonetheless. Another one on episode 115, and that was Joe and Charlie talking about step 2. There is a solution and the spiritual experience coming out of the big book. And Joe and Charlie were AA speakers talking about the 12 steps in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the comment was, "So interesting." Awesome. The most recent comment that we got was from episode 59 with Darren F. And Darren's been on the podcast a number of times. And this one, we were talking about carrying the SAA message through service. And the comment was, "That was interesting. Swung me back to Christ. Glory to you, Lord Christ." Fantastic. And yeah, I don't remember exactly what we talked about in terms of religion on that one, but I'm so glad it got you back to a good place. We did receive a few emails over the past few weeks. One of them was a bit too lengthy to discuss on episode 195. That one was a long episode, and so I wanted to save that for this one. This is from our listener M. I shared one of his emails on the podcast a few months ago, Can't remember exactly which episode, but this is a lengthy update, and so I wanted to read that here. And says, "Hello, Jason. I hope you are doing well. I just passed 1 year since discovery, and that also means 1 year in recovery. It has me reflecting on the last year and where I have come from. I thought I would reach out again and provide an update, and maybe it would help someone else. Looking back, I'm not the person I was a year ago. There's been a lot of difficult transformation and growth that has occurred one step at a time. At times, I wish it was faster, but I can see my higher power fulfilling the promises in my life. I've seen a lot of emotional growth. Not only have I learned to sit with my emotions, I've learned a lot about vulnerability. One of the things I really feel my higher power is teaching me is that I can be vulnerable and safe. The part of this that I'm slowly embracing is that safety doesn't mean the absence of pain and hurt. I can be vulnerable and still get hurt, but I am safe because I will take care of that part of me in healthy ways. This goes deeply against what I learned as a child in this world. I have been becoming a better parent. It has been a challenging journey, and I am by no means perfect. I still struggle a lot with the overwhelm that comes from noise, and that is something I am actively tackling. However, I've had deep, meaningful moments with my kids. My oldest comes to me and wants to talk about his feelings with me. I am able to listen and provide insight and strategies that I've been learning myself. That is a new thing for me, and the man I used to be didn't have the space, capability, and the awareness to even begin to show up that way. I've really begun to appreciate life, not just going through it, but starting to thrive. My outer circle has become a source of life for me, and there's so much fulfillment. It is so strange to look at where I am. 1 year ago, I was not okay and could not be okay if my wife wasn't also okay. Negative emotion or conflict would send me spiraling. I am able to hold multiple realities at once. In one hand, I have my recovery and the good things and fulfillment that comes from it. I feel that I'm in a good place and actually enjoying life. On the other hand, I have the reality where my relationship with my wife is at. Things are challenging, there is immense hurt and no trust. There are good moments and there are bad. There's a ton of uncertainty that 1 year ago I could not tolerate. Now I am able to hold both, recognize both, and still be okay. Still have serenity. That is the amazing thing about acceptance, and something I am learning is embedding every step of the program. I'm learning to let go of outcomes, but still show up in meaningful ways. I've done a lot of work on my inner child. I've come to realize how much he was showing up in the way I used to live. That impulsive need to escape, avoid, and shut down was from him running the show. Now I can notice things, not always, but often. I talk to him, tell him I see that he is scared, and that he is okay because I will take care of him regardless of what happens. He doesn't need to run the show anymore. There's a better way of living. I've struggled with anxiety for years. I never realized just how much of that was the fear that part of me was feeling. I always thought anxiety was just a thing, a state that happens, a disorder. In my life, it is so much more, and I've been able to start addressing that root. I'm also learning not to abandon myself. I am so early in the process, but I am beginning to advocate for the things that I need and hold some boundaries. This is particularly challenging because I have always felt the need to fix. I couldn't tolerate discomfort and was terrified to ask for things. These are just some of my thoughts as I reflect. I appreciate having this place to feel connected with others. I go to 3 meetings a week, journal daily, do step work, counseling, read growth books, listen to podcasts, meditate, and connect daily with other members. These things have been key to my growth and recovery. I know in my life, addiction is a blanket term. I am an addict, and I've been addicted to many different things: alcohol, porn and sex, and video games. I am learning to live a life free of addiction and discovering the fulfillment that comes from that. I am a year free of porn and cheating. I am 10 months from masturbation, 6 months since I added objectification to my inner circle. I am just so grateful. I want to thank you for all the work you put into this podcast. It has made a difference for me. I also want to thank all the guests who have shared. Would love to connect and be a guest as a way to pass on what has been given to me. Again, thank you. Signed, M. Thank you so much for that update. That's really touching. And yes, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. I will send you an email and see when we can set up a time to record. I also did want to mention when you talked about being overwhelmed from noise, that my wife goes through that as well. And for Christmas, I got her these earplugs that I am not going to mention the name here on the podcast, but I'll be happy to email that to you, that are for anxiety. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a good purchase or not, but she put them in Christmas morning and just sunk into the couch and was like, oh my God, this is something that I've needed. And so whenever we have fireworks going off outside, loud conversations, other noisy situations, car alarms that are going off, she puts those in and the anxiety starts to melt away. So I'll email you about those. And if anyone else is interested, I can email you as well. But I don't want to be a promotional tool for those, but it really worked wonders on the topic of noise and anxiety. So yes, thank you so much for this email. We just got another email asking to share a first step. And this person is also working with his sponsee, looking into making starter packets for potential temporary sponsors. So I'm really interested in talking to him about that. And so hopefully I can connect with him and find a time to record his first step and that conversation around the temporary sponsors packet. Just thinking of upcoming episodes. We've got a couple more before we get to episode 200. I am planning on doing a panel discussion with past guests of the podcast, friends and program, or any new listeners that would like to join. I haven't set a date and time for recording, but I've got maybe 5 or 6 people that have reached out and let me know that they're interested. So that will be probably sometime in September. I do have a few more episodes that are recorded, including the shares from the August SAA and COSA speaker meeting. So those will be episodes 198 and 199 before we get to 200. So with that, I did want to move on to music. During our conversation, we did talk about bilateral sound and binaural beats. And I pulled up some information that I wanted to share here before playing some samples. Bilateral audio and binaural audio both use 2 audio channels through headphones, but they work differently and serve different purposes. Bilateral audio alternates sound back and forth between the left and right ear to calm the nervous system, while binaural audio plays slightly different frequencies in each ear to create a perceived pulsating tone inside the brain. I've got a couple of things. Most of this is coming from Calm, who does the Calm app, and they've got a website. But bilateral audio, how it works: sound pans or jumps clearly from the left speaker to the right speaker in a rhythmic alternating pattern. Main goal: emotional regulation, trauma processing, and reducing anxiety. Commonly used in EMDR therapy and grounding exercises to help both sides of the brain communicate. And this was one of the things that we talked about in our conversation. So that, as opposed to binaural audio, how it works: 2 distinct, closely matched frequencies. For example, here it says 300 hertz in the left ear and 310 hertz in the right ear are played simultaneously, and that gives a difference of 10 hertz. And I'll explain that as I get to an audio sample. The main goal for this is brainwave entrainment, deep meditation, or enhanced focus. Common use: the brain perceives the mathematical difference between the 2 tones as a third beating or pulsating sound, which aims to guide the brain into specific states like theta or alpha waves. What was really cool about doing a deep dive on YouTube around binaural beats is I learned how to make them. The software that I use to record the podcast is perfect for making such tones. So I did have an example here that I wanted to play. I forget what frequencies I was using. I think it was 220 and maybe 224 hertz in each of the ears. So the way I have this sample set up is one side muted and then the other side muted. So you can hear the two distinct tones, and then having them combined, you can hear the pulsating waves. So I wanted to play a short sample of what I was able to create here with my audio software. This is a lot of fun, and I'm going to be exploring this for myself. I tend to like the lower frequencies. I use these ones because they're a little bit more audible. I'm going to be playing a sample of some really low frequencies in just a minute here. But for an example, that would be harder to hear the difference audibly. So looking at the different wavelengths that are targeted, and again, this is the difference between the frequency of the left ear and the right ear. So delta, which would be 1 to 4 hertz difference, is linked to deep sleep and physical recovery. Theta waves, which is 4 to 8 hertz, is linked to light sleep, deep meditation, and creativity. Alpha waves, which is between 8 and 13 hertz, linked to relaxed alertness, positive moods, and reduced anxiety. Beta waves, 14 to 30 hertz, linked to high concentration, active problem solving, and sharp focus. And gamma is a difference 30 hertz or above, linked to peak awareness and high level cognition. So in our conversation, we talked about me listening to Tool in this type of therapy. I knew for a fact that I had a sample of a Tool song that had binaural beats added. And they also have several songs that include bilateral audio. So we're going to start off with some binaural beats. If you do a search for binaural beats on YouTube, you can find tons of different things, different frequencies, different feels. The one that I wanted to play was called Super Low Frequency Healing Music, Fall Asleep Faster, 9 Hours of Sleep Music. And this one, I really love the frequencies that they use to create the binaural beats is really, really low. And they just kind of mix that in with some other audio. You can listen to binaural beats by themselves or have it mixed in with what you're listening to. So anyway, here is a sample of the super low frequency healing music. Very cool. All the way back on episode 9 of the podcast was when I first started talking about music as a higher power. And I talked about Tool's song Parable and Parabola, those two songs combined, and that I've got a version of Parable that has been slowed down 800%. And I use this all the time for meditation or concentration at work. So when I posted episode 9, any examples of this had been pulled down off of YouTube. I found a few that have been reposted, and I knew there was one that had binaural beats added. And so I wanted to play a clip of the natural sound of the intro called Parable from Tool. And here is Parable slowed down 800%. The video that I'm using calls it Parabola, but Parabola is the heavier part of the song. Parable is the mellow part. And so this is Parable slowed down with binaural beats added. Love this. So I used this and a couple of other Tool songs that have been slowed down 800%. I don't know why 800% works, but there is just a ton of different examples of slowed down music at 800%. A lot of stuff from Radiohead, things from like Hans Zimmer from the Interstellar soundtrack, a couple of other different soundtracks like Blade Runner, got some Queen on here. Justin Bieber. Anyway, if you look up 800% slower on YouTube, you can find all sorts of these really stretched out, spacey sounding songs, and some of them may have binaural beats added. So anyway, I did want to play that. Moving on to bilateral audio, I had talked about Tool as well as Heilung, and so I've got a few examples from both of those bands. On each of the Tool albums, there's usually one or two ambient tracks. On their Anima album, there's a song called Ions, could be negative ions. That's basically the sound of a Jacob's ladder, kind of electric spark jumping from right to left. It becomes really interesting hearing the rhythmic cycle with that. Most of the song has kind of a thundering sound of probably a big sheet of metal being pounded, but I wanted to play a part that was a little bit mellower, but you can still hear the spark jumping from right to left. On the 10,000 Days album, which I had just talked about on episode 195, the last track is called, in two different pronunciations here, Viginti Tres or Viginti Tres, which means 23 in Latin. It has a lot of synthesizer whooshes back and forth between left and right. And so I wanted to play a little bit of that before getting to Wings for Marie. So here is Viginti Tres. Awesome. I have a version of this and Wings for Marie Part 1 combined as one track, and then 10,000 Days as the other track, and they both line up really well. I think it is called Tool's Easter Egg by combining those three songs together. the song Wings for Marie, and this is Maynard's dedication to his mother's passing after being paralyzed for 27 years or 10,000 days. There is an auditory whoosh going back and forth between left and right. And also the guitar layering goes back and forth before the vocals kick in. And so I wanted to play a clip of that. Super cool. And this goes on throughout the song, and yeah, I love it. Before moving on to Heilung, there's a Canadian prog metal band called Voivod, and their song Experiment. When I was in high school, I used to lay down between my speakers and listen to this intro as it slowly goes back and forth between left and right and slowly increases. My speakers were much bigger and louder than the headphones that I had at the time, so it was a real cool sound, and so I wanted to play a little bit of Voivod's Experiment. And then finally, I wanted to move on to Heilung. And this is what I was describing in our conversation. I first played this on the podcast on episode 70, which was right after I had seen them live. This is the song that they finished their ritual with, and it is such a release. In fact, I wanted to play a clip of Maria talking about how their music works. And I do believe that I played this on a previous episode of the podcast when describing their music, but they do a lot with audio and how it makes you feel. So here's Maria talking about this.
We also explain Heilung sometimes with it being a turbulent journey that is supposed to leave you relieved in the end, because it can be super intense to listen to, and the whole Ofnir album also can be like really a lot, a big mouthful to swallow, but when you come out on the other side, it's like this catharsis process where you're like, okay, all tension, and then relief, and then you feel better, like a massage therapist would do, like push the points that hurts, and then when you release, you feel better.
A few episodes ago, I had talked about getting, for my birthday, the expanded digibook versions of the Heilung albums, and they have extensive liner notes for each of the songs. On episode 70, when I first introduced the song, I remember talking about the Merseburg charms that was part of the vocal. A lot of this is chanting, but there is a vocal line that comes in as well. But I really love what they have to say here, so I wanted to read some of that. In this song, the listener has the chance to experience something that must probably come to us all the way from the hunter-gatherer period. The rhythmic throat singing in the beginning that gave this piece its name follows the most northern traditions of the globe. Our sisters from the First Nations of Greenland and Canada are the only ones still singing in this style, and it is supposed to bring happiness and laughter. Heilung, of course, adds its own elements, so the style of singing is adapted. The words, though, are Old Norse. This language, once called Danstunge, Danish tongue, was in use when the Northmen and the First Nations initially met. In Hammer Hippier, Heilung, as usual, travels through time and space, and the most ancient sounds turn into an evocation to Woden, the high god of the German tribes. Here he is called upon as the great healer from the 9th or 10th centuries. We know spells in Old High German preserved in the so-called Merseburg incantations. In these spells, traditional pagan rhyme merges with Christian end rhyme. Analogies to the Merseburg incantation can be found in Gaelic, Latvian, and Finnish, which might hint towards an ancient Indo-European origin of these charms. Ancient Indian sources also provide similar spells. In the beginning, the spells to calm fire and inflammation are chanted, only later to be followed by the mighty words of Woden, healing blood and bone. Remember that Heilung means healing or care in modern High German. Heilung does not only believe in the healing power of its sound, and especially the live rituals, we experience it. We consciously entice and release the healing and helping spirits from the past. The sounds in this piece might describe as a raging painful sickness or accident and the cry for help. The spell itself is recited in beautiful enchanting tones, and through repeating it, it unfolds its effect. It is its own kind of medicine that can lift you up from the dark world of hurt so you may breathe again. The song finishes with the calming and soothing Iron Age Norwegian blessing, and the sounds turn from exhausting grinding to a more released atmospheric spectrum. All is well. So that being said, in this piece, the chanting that goes on, Hamama and Hip Hip Hip, go back and forth between the left and right speakers, alternating each word. A lot of the drums, multiple drummers on this track. So the drums are hard right, hard left, and so you get a lot of the left and right sounds. So I wanted to play a couple of different spots from the song. It is a long song. I don't know if Christopher layered in any binaural beats. It wouldn't surprise me if he did. But this has just such an emotional release. Listening to it, seeing it live even more so. But here is Hamir Hippier from Heilung. Later in the song, there is another rhythmic chant that goes in, and the reason why I wanted to play the studio version of this as opposed to the live version, the layering in of the previous chants comes in and fills the void. It's just amazing. This is the section in between the Merseburg charm parts. just for translation, and I've read this on the podcast before, like bone sprain, so blood sprain, so joint sprain, bone to bone, blood to blood, joints to joints, so they may be healed. And so here is the end of the Merseburg charm and the winding down of Hamir Hipir. Love this, and every different version of this, I've got 3 different live versions and then the studio version. Each of them has their own specialness, but love this, and I will probably be adding a link to a live video of them performing this. The Red Rocks version is just absolutely amazing. That brings us to the end of this episode. In my conversation with Tyler and Brannon, we were talking about retreats. And it just so happens the Southern California retreat is going to be coming up for fall of 2026. And that will be October 2nd through 4th in Oceanside. So if you are in Southern California and are interested, I've got the information for that. On the registration website, it says, enrich your recovery with a weekend of relaxation, fellowship, recreation, and reflection. All participants and speakers are SAA members. All retreats begin with dinner on Friday and end with lunch on Sunday. The price includes lodging, meals, snacks, and workshops. And please note that this is a mixed retreat. If you have any questions, you can email saaretreat@gmail.com. And I will be leaving a link for this in the show notes as well. If you had any feedback for the podcast on specific episodes, if you had any music that is part of your spiritual journey that you would like to share with other podcast listeners, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. If you wanted to get a hold of me personally, if you had any questions about the podcast or the program of SAA, want to be a guest on the podcast, interested in being part of episode 200, or if you wanted to find out further information about Tyler and Brannon's podcast, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. I thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.